Good morning, and welcome to the Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church worship service. This morning, let us begin by joining together in singing "Comfort Me."
Good morning, everyone. I am Jake Morrill, not Rachel Smith-Jones. She's going to be doing this next week. That was my mistake. I want to welcome everyone here for this time of gathering and community and some hope, tenderness, and uplift. I want to welcome especially those who are here for the first time or back for the first time in a long time. If you are, I'd like to ask you to consider three things. First of all, if you're on Facebook, join the Facebook group ORUUC. Secondly, after Sunday, every week, in the 11:15 hour, newcomers are invited to join what's called Inquirers. That's a session where you're invited to learn about Universalism, about our congregation, and get to know one another. Those of you who are just coming into the congregation. Today we're going to be talking about the history of Unitarian Universalism, and I'll be joining you all for that. Last of all, you'll find a comment in the chat box, and we'll ask you to put your information there, just so we can be in touch as the months go forward. Now, as people know, week after week for years now, the offering has gone every week out into the community, half of it of undesignated gift to serve some mission or cause that our congregation supports. For the month of May and June, we are dedicating this half to the ministers' discretionary fund, so that our congregation can respond especially to the struggles and strains in households at this time. So your generosity is already reaching out and affecting those who are trying to keep their head above water. We've got an online or a recorded announcement from Amanda Fischel.
everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amanda Fischel, and I'm going to be telling you about two opportunities that you have to support ORUUC and our community. The first of these is our Split the Plate program. This is a program that we've done for many years where we send half of the undesignated offering each Sunday to an outside organization or one of our shared ministries like Stone Soup or Ecumenical Storehouse. And that's a way for us to support those organizations in their work in the community. I'm taking nominations right now for next year's Split the Plate recipients, and I had initially asked for those to be submitted by June 5th. I need to change that deadline and move it up a little bit to June 2nd. The reason for this is that we're going to be doing ballots by mail for this June congregational meeting, and I will be able to have the ballots included with the notice of meeting, and that's going to save us on some postage. So if you could get me your nominations by June 2nd, that'd be great. There's a Google form that you can get either in the Exponent or on Facebook, or you can email me at amsfischel, F-I-S-H-E-L, @gmail.com. The second project is something that I think of as a community memoir of self-isolation. This is a project that came out of discussions with some of my Rummage co-leaders about ways that we could still fundraise for the church, even though we can't hold the rummage sale. So what I'm hoping for is short pieces of writing, poems, printable artwork that will go alongside recipes in a standard kind of cookbook, as well as if your recipe has a story, please share that too. You can get those to me by emailing oruucrummage@gmail.com, and I think it's going to take me probably a week or so to be compiling that, so if you could get that to me within the next week, that'd be great. Thanks.
Today, sorry everybody, we're having some echo issues. I'm hearing myself echo. I think it's better. Today, the city burns. Where hard hearts become more vulnerable, where eyes apt to turn to the side can truly see, though they be dripping with tears. Today, something burns, tragic, righteous. I will leave that to the holy conscience of those assembled. This little chalice, this little flame, it does not give off much light, unlike some of the fires we've seen. These past few days, these fires, wild and awful and righteous, scattering rays with a smoldering sound, speaking in 1,000 voices, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Where some see a riot, friends, I see a new Pentecost. Hot tongues, sharp and flaming, I see the Holy Spirit move in the hand, giving life, the shape of justice, like we sing. Holy of holies, name beyond naming, don't give us peace until there is justice. We may yet need to shake, to quake, to see, to feel, to think as this world burns. May these fires be as a chalice lighting, calling in more justice, more righteousness, more love. Rise up, Unitarians. Rise up, Universalists. Rise up, children of love, and let us all light a light. Stoke those inner flames, those fires of a love that does not quit. This is who we are called to be. Amen.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
On this last day of May, we come into this sacred space, not made sacred by pews or walls, but sanctified by our commitments to one another and to the world. We bring our struggles, our dreams, our worries, doubts, fears, and hopes. May we find in this sacred space, in this sacred time, comfort, self-knowledge, renewed commitment, a commitment to inclusion and justice for all. May this be so in the spirit of love. Amen.
This is the time in the service when, as we do every week, we are invited to come together to share whatever is in our hearts, be it burden or celebration. And you can do this in many different ways. You can hold up a candle and spread the light in that way. Or you can share in the chat box a word that's on your heart or a phrase. If you'd like something included in the spoken prayer afterwards, I invite you to send an email to oruuc.community.prayers, plural, @gmail.com so that it can be included in the prayer. However you are, wherever you are, whatever your story, whatever you bring, all of you and all that you are is welcome here. invite you now in this week that has had so much struggle and suffering and righteous anger and grief to simply take a breath in and out, understanding as if for the first time how holy that is. You're invited to close your eyes or to rest your gaze on some still point of beauty, coming home back to yourself, back to life, as we enter this time of prayer and contemplation and open hearts and broken hearts. Spirit of love within us, among us, and beyond us, we welcome this moment with that tender, curious, questioning and questing heart, understanding that things as they are this morning will not always be as they are, and yet not knowing yet how that could be, how anything could change from how it is today. And as we gather in this spirit with these questions, there are those among us who lift up certain prayers, concerns of their hearts, and we share these as well. There's one among us who shares that this one is really struggling with depression right now, all while trying to put together a depression support group. Let us cover that one with the generosity and compassion and support they may be seeking, in which we have, and let us understand that all those that we encounter are struggling with some great struggle. And so let us be compassionate and tenacious in our love. There's one among us who asks prayers for upcoming gender affirmation surgery tomorrow. Let us celebrate the courage of all who claim the lives true to them and their Creator. And let us also feel inspired and invited likewise to claim our own true lives and to live in that way. Let us support one another as we do this brave, brave thing. And also one among us asks prayers for friends shot with pepper bullets by the Knoxville Police Department while trying to protect teenagers and bystanders. Let us be in solidarity with all those suffering in the name of love and justice, and pray for the healing not only of those so afflicted, but also the society. One among us asks prayers for a fruitful summer of ministerial formation. And let us understand ourselves as we give that encouragement that each one of us, in some way or other, is in formation to do that work of ministry, of care and uplift that each one of us is called to do out of the authentic selves that we are and lives that we lead. One among us is thankful that there is a little less uncertainty in their life. And let us give thanks for those times, those moments where the clouds part and there is a little more assurance, a little more clarity, a little greater orientation. And likewise, let us encourage one another and celebrate these times with each other, even as we do come together in struggle and lack of clarity. One among us, Rose Williams, asks that we would keep her partner Michael in our hearts and prayers as his health challenges continue, with gratitude for the support they have received. As we gather around Michael and Rose with that care and those prayers, let us also hold in our hearts all in this community, this congregation, who are facing health challenges and struggles, perhaps publicly known or else less known. And let us hold one another in that care with that patience and that hope that as we move forward together, not asking perfection or neatness or for anyone to have figured everything out, but instead that we move together forward in the spirit of love, which opens a way, which opens a path, and which one day will awaken us to that beloved community in which all are cherished and known by name and loved as they are. With that vision before us this morning, let us rededicate our hearts and our lives. So may it be, blessed be, and amen.
There are many ways we pray as Unitarian Universalists. We pray with our hands, we pray with our mouths, we pray with our feet. We also pray with our financial offerings. This is a way that we can keep our ministries alive. Today, the split the plate for today goes to the Minister's Discretionary Fund, which is a means by which the ministry team at Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church is able to actualize love in the community with $1, with real cold hard cash when it's needed, where it's needed. Give as you are able, give as the Spirit calls you.
Kind friends all gather round. There's something I would say, that what brings us together here has blessed us all today. Love has built a circle that holds us all inside. The strangers are as heavenly and loneliness can't hide. You must give yourself to love. If love is what you're after, open up your heart to the tears and laughter and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
I've walked these mountains in the rain. I've learned to love the wind. I've been up before the sunrise to watch the day begin. I always knew I'd find you, though I never did know how. But like sunshine on a cloudy day, you stand before me now.
You must
Give yourself to love. If love is what you're after, open up your heart to the tears and laughter and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
Love is born of fire, it's planted like a seed. Love can't give you everything, but it gives you what you need. Love comes when you're ready, love comes when you're afraid. It will be your greatest teacher, the best friend you have made. You must
Give yourself to love. If love is what you're after, open up your heart to the tears and laughter and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
For all that has
poetically,
for all the gifts that have been given, we gladly receive them and celebrate how they will reach these lives affected in these times, doing the work in our name of transforming love and compassion. So may it be.
poetically translated to golden joinery, kintsugi or kintsukurī is the centuries-old Japanese art of fixing broken pottery. As opposed to trying to hide repairs, kintsugi uses a special tree sap lacquer dusted with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The beautiful gold pattern gives a unique character and special strength. This method highlights each artifact's history by celebrating its brokenness instead of hiding it. Through kintsugi, the pieces become stronger, sturdier, and more complex than before. Its beauty comes from transformation and restoration, from being broken to becoming whole again, but not the same as before. Kintsugi represents some traditional values of Japanese culture. First and foremost, the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, or seeing beauty in the flawed or imperfect. It also embodies the Japanese feeling of mottainai, the value of preservation, and muzen, the acceptance of change. The process of kintsugi highlights these values. The first step is to collect and examine the broken pieces, holding them in the hands and asking, what has happened here? How can this be mended in a way that restores its grace and dignity? The artist must decide how to fit the newly molded pieces together in a way that strengthens the object while acknowledging the trauma of the break. The next step is to smooth the rough edges, scraping and sanding to soften and shape the pieces so they can fit back together. Then a heavy black lacquer is generously applied to strengthen the joints and keep the broken pieces together. The seams are thick and noticeable, holding the object together, restoring the original shape and strengthening the object, but also making repair a visibly prominent part of the restored piece. Lastly, the seams are ever so delicately dusted with gold, gently and carefully and lovingly applied to enhance the beauty of the repair. And though it's returned to its original shape, the defining feature of the object are the gold lines that tell the story of how it was shattered into pieces and put back together again. Kintsugi reminds us that what is broken can be repaired, but it is not the same as before. It is both stronger and bolder, and at the same time, more tender and delicate. It tells us the story of becoming whole again, but at the same time, transformed and changed. May it be so, and may we be so. I invite you to form an arch to welcome the children into our hearts.
In the Hebrew scriptures, otherwise known as the Old Testament, prophets like Jeremiah and Amos speak from the depths of their time with righteous anger and also with a vision for how things could be, a world transformed. This past week, we have seen cities throughout our country, communities rising up in grief and in anger and in solidarity and in power. And some of those voices to me have sounded like these ancient prophets from religious tradition. And I wanted to share one of those voices this morning with you all as part of our service so that we could hear it in a holy context as a holy prophet speaking truth to her times. Now, I want to tell you, for those of you who are parents, that this is a video clip that will have the D word twice. And so if you want to make some parenting choices about that, now is a time when you can mute your audio or make some choices about that. But we're going to hear from national activist leader Tamika Mallory speaking from Minneapolis a couple of nights ago.
Reason why buildings are burning is because this city, this state would prefer preserving that white nationalism and that white supremacist mindset over arresting, charging, and helping to convict 4 officers who killed a black man. That is the reality of what we're dealing with. This is not just a few cops doing things across the country. This is not a good cop versus bad cop situation. This is Ahmaud Arbery being shot down by white men on the streets of Georgia. Breonna Taylor being killed in her home. This is in New York City, where we were until freedom. We were just in New York fighting the police officers who, in the name of social distancing, were damn near killing black young people on our streets. This is a coordinated activity happening across this nation. And so we are in a state of emergency. Black people are dying in a state of emergency. We cannot look at this as an isolated incident. The reason why buildings are burning are not just for our brother George Floyd. They're burning down because people here in Minnesota are saying to people in New York, to people in California, to people in Memphis, to people all across this nation, enough is enough. And we are not responsible for the mental illness that has been inflicted upon our people by the American government, institutions, and those people who are in positions of power. I don't give a damn if they burn down Target, because Target should be on the streets with us, calling for the justice that our people deserve. Talk about it, Tamika. Where was AutoZone at the time when Philando Castile was shot in a car, which is what they actually represent? Where were they? So if you are not coming to the people's defense, then don't challenge us when young people and other people who are frustrated and instigated by the people you pay. You are paying instigators to be among our people out there throwing rocks, breaking windows, and burning down buildings. And so young people are responding to that. They are enraged, and there's an easy way to stop it. Arrest the cops. Charge the cops. Charge all the cops. Not just some of them, not just here in Minneapolis. Charge them in every city across America where our people are being murdered. Charge them everywhere. That's the bottom line. Charge the cops. Do your job. Do what you say this country is supposed to be about, the land of the free for all. It has not been free for black people, and we are tired. Don't talk to us about looting. Y'all are the looters. America has looted black people. America looted the Native Americans when they first came here. So looting is what you do. We learned it from you. We learned violence from you. We learned violence from you. The violence was what we learned from you. So if you want us to do better, then damn it, you do better.
As I say, I hear Tamika Mallory, who has been a leader in Black Lives Matter, who was an organizer of the Women's March, who is a voice for our times as a prophet, not unlike Jeremiah and Amos. And for me to be in relationship with her voice is to be reminded of my place in this world. I'm having this thing with Zoom where it pops up over my script. Here we go. Okay. In the New Testament, the book of Acts begins on a somber note. We are with the apostles, those who had loved Jesus and traveled with him, and they are plunged into loss and grief. They had believed in the message and the ministry of Jesus so much, even against the odds. They had hoped for so much. They had dared to imagine the mighty Roman Empire which ruled the land in every direction would not have the last word, that a new world could be born, that instead of being subjects of an empire, they might one day be citizens of a kingdom rooted in love and compassion, in mercy and justice. But then on Holy Week, Jesus returns to Jerusalem, tensions rise, he's betrayed, arrested, and then crucified. Yes, those who love him have had the experience of Easter, the assurance that all is not lost. But what could that mean? How will now they go forward? What can they do? Who will lead them? They ask all these questions, even as they know they themselves are not safe. It's known that they are companions of that holy man and known troublemaker, Jesus. Authorities are keeping their eyes on these people. They're under watch, under threat. Now it's 40 days after Easter and things still aren't all that clear, still aren't safe. Over all these weeks as they've prayed and reflected together, they've had experiences of Jesus. It's like he's talking right to them and he's told them and reminded them about the kingdom of love, about what it will be like, but how to even understand that or to trust it anymore after all that they've seen. It's festival time in Jerusalem and the streets are packed. In this story, those who love Jesus gather in the upper room where they have been staying. Not only the 12 apostles, it says, but women leaders too, and family members of Jesus. They meet to confer and console this community, to figure things out. Here in this country, at the end of May 2020, we find ourselves likewise in a time of heavy discernment when all is not clear. Already we had been a nation angry and adrift under leadership that has sought to divide us. Already, despite all our resources and capacities, we had found ourselves managing a runaway pandemic with the highest number of deaths in the world, and the number still rising in this state and elsewhere. And then this past week came the news of George Floyd in Minneapolis, handcuffed and subdued. He cried out for help. Over and over, he said, "I can't breathe." And a police officer kneeled on him, obstructing his breathing for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. 2 minutes and 53 seconds of which were after Floyd was already unconscious. Over a 19-year career, this officer had many times been written up for use of excessive force, but to no consequence. This officer had learned that on the streets he could pretty well do what he wanted. So it was not the story here of a bad apple, but the story of a system that had turned a blind eye to his misconduct, that tacitly encouraged him to behave in that murderous way. Even with the evidence plain now to anyone who saw it on video, this officer walked free several days without being arrested. This in a community where in July 2016, Philando Castile was murdered in his car by a police officer who walked free of all charges, and in a country where a vigilante vigilante mob murdered Ahmaud Arbery out for a jog in February in coastal Georgia, caught on video, and then were free for 2 months, over 2 months, before finally, under immense public pressure, being arrested for that murder. Where in mid-March, officers in Louisville, Kentucky, shot and killed Breonna Taylor in her apartment, and there has still not been any arrest. In this country where we remember and say the names Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell. We say all these names and we grieve with their families, and we grieve for our communities and our country as well. How tempting it is to point fingers, to find villains. With a bad actor here and there, you can pluck them out, make an example of them, and move on, vindicated that things are working as they should. How challenging it is, on the other hand, though, to comprehend a system and a history that produces clear patterns over time of unequal treatment and unequal conditions. How challenging it is to look at this country we love with all its high ideals and to face the reality of how far we remain from its promise. Oak Ridge can sometimes imagine that we are immune or apart from what happens elsewhere. Don't borrow trouble is a phrase I have heard. But only a few days ago here in Oak Ridge, someone called the police. This past week, someone called the police on a young African-American man for supposedly breaking into a car. When the police arrived, it turned out that the young man was sitting in the car talking with his grandmother. In Oak Ridge this past week. Thank God the situation ended peaceably. But that is to say that the conditions of systemic racism, of living under threat, are no different in our community than they are anywhere else. And as we hear in this story, part of the threat is someone who sees a young man getting into a car and imagines a crime, believes that the young man should be punished for nothing other than existing, nothing other than talking with his grandmother. I wanted to share that video of Tamika Mallory we saw earlier because she's describing a view of this country that links it all together, that shares the history of looting as a crime first perpetrated against Native Americans and then also African Americans, that describes violence by African Americans whenever it happens as a response only to a country that enacted violence upon generations of African Americans first. We learned it from you, she says. We learned it from you. And that's part of discernment present in this moment, to get oriented to reality, which means to bear witness to suffering, not to run away from it, not to cover it up or explain it away, but just to bear witness, to tell the truth, and to be there present to it. I want to tell a story from my own life about what that's been like this past week. Yesterday, I drove out to Ray County with envelopes full of $20 bills to hand out. As you know, when Congress passed the CARES Act in March to send relief checks to households all over, they didn't include every household, like the undocumented people who work in fields to get vegetables to our table or in factories to get meat to our table. A generous family in this congregation had given a gift to distribute some of this money to these families, and earlier this week, Molly and I raised funds to match that initial gift. So with these funds given from others, I drove out to meet up with 4 families, all headed by single moms, so that in a time of economic slowdown, they could get a little relief. The first 3 handoffs were no-nonsense affairs. They were grateful, but I didn't linger long. But the 4th one, the last household, was different. When I finally located the place she was living, she met me out in the yard, full of tears. With my rudimentary Spanish, I heard some of her story. And later on, I learned more. A story involving trauma that I won't add words to. Poverty and undocumented status often means vulnerability to suffering that I, in my life, can scarcely comprehend. Even before later on learning more of her story, the experience, the encounter in her front yard with her left me so shaken that I decided to drive around town slowly before I got back on the highway to head home. Like so many communities, the farmland around Ray County is one that's been abandoned by the powers that be, and it shows. Closed shops, boarded up buildings. In downtown Dayton, I passed the courthouse of the infamous Scopes monkey trial. And then across the street from a junkyard of piled up cars, I saw a sign. It said, Trail of Tears, Historic Route. The Trail of Tears, of course, being when President Andrew Jackson forced Cherokee people off their land to head west to clear the region for white settlement. And I saw the America that Tamika Mallory in that video clip is describing. A trail of tears threading through centuries and throughout generations with a pervasiveness that is suffocating and hard to escape. I mean, as I handed out those envelopes of cash to those households, the $20 bills had the face of Andrew Jackson on them. That's how pervasive it is when we think of who gets honored and who gets remembered and who gets celebrated. The man responsible for such terror and suffering is the one that we honor with his face on our money. This is a basic fact about the depth of what we're up against. And here is my dilemma from my situation. In the face of lives divested of resources, I was the one handing out envelopes of money. In the face of those left powerless by a system of justice that's been rigged against them, I feel relatively safe in my skin, in my life, in my household. I don't have to fear a no-knock warrant like the one that led to the death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. I don't feel guilty about it, but I am complicit. I benefit from this inequity, from these conditions. I am responsible. To whom much is given, much is required. Now, we, ORUUC, are a diverse congregation, so many of you don't share the degree of unearned privilege my white skin and gender and class have given me. But as a whole congregation, we have resources and a reputation built over 7 decades now for being a leader in Oak Ridge. What to do when we allow ourselves, as we're able, to wake up to suffering and to not run away, but to stay with it, to bear witness. I know one thing, the answer is not endless analysis. It's not armchair punditry, which I can be guilty of. At ORUUC, we talk about coming alive with purpose and passion, and that's true, maybe even more so in the face of suffering in our lives, in our families, in our communities, in this country. When we encounter pain, how will we then meet it with purpose? Earlier, Christine was telling us about the Japanese art of kintsugi, creating beauty from what's broken, finding beauty not from hiding the brokenness, but from elevating it, glorifying it, converting the suffering into what shines. We know this as a healing process in our own lives, that wherever we've been hurt and even broken is often where our gifts can shine through, gifts of compassion, of wisdom, of patience, of love. And so as we seek not to run from suffering, nor do we seek to erase or deny it, but instead to be part of turning it from a story of suffering and separation over time into a story of healing and hope. Well, this morning it would be only a Band-Aid to declare words of hope. We need to stay here now with the suffering first. But we stay here in this valley of shadows, bearing witness to suffering with an eye on the horizon, where the first light of dawn flickers, where we can start to imagine our journey might go. Those people who gathered in the upper room were not gathering there to form an action plan. They weren't there to make metrics or mechanisms of success. No, they were there in their suffering with patience and love. It had been weeks now since their loss, and yet they waited and prayed and gave themselves to love. And this is when in the story something incredible happens all at once, like a mighty wind, or you might even say like the breath of the world. The Holy Spirit sweeps through. It fills the room, fills the moment, fills each one of them there. And the heaviness of all these weeks before lifts away. They rejoice and they speak in different tongues, each in different ways, and yet understand one another. Now, as I hear this story, what I hear is that each of them speaks out of their own authentic lives in their own authentic ways, with their own authentic gifts, and despite all the difference, is nonetheless understood one by the other and received and beloved just as they are. There is such a celebratory spirit of freedom among them. There is such a holy uprising, such a ruckus, that many who've gathered in Jerusalem gather around in wonder. Some even suspect that maybe they're drunk. But they're not drunk. What they are is free. Not one law has changed through the whole Roman Empire in that moment. The same injustice that crucified Jesus and that now has crucified George Floyd this past week and crucified so many others through history is still in place at that moment. But there is a power beyond the clampdown and far greater, the holy and uplifting, unyielding spirit of love, lifting their eyes and their hearts and their minds and their dreams far beyond the control of the empire, far beyond their own fears, their own grief, far beyond whatever glory comes from getting your face on a $20 bill. It is with this spirit that they go out into the streets and the community and begin sharing the good news of liberation from fear, liberation from suffering, liberation from oppression, liberation from everything that has held people down. In this country this week, we are seeing all kinds of things, and there are many ways to understand it and parse it and pick it apart. At ORUUC, we are and will be in discernment about how to use our vast privilege as a congregation with resources and reputation to bring to bear. If we are to be who we say that we are, we will be on the side of that single mom in that yard in Ray County, much more than on the side of Andrew Jackson. We'll be on the side of George Floyd, much more than on the side of all that conspired to squeeze the breath out of him. We will be on the side of breath itself, knowing that it is the spirit of life, ORUUC. And we will plant ourselves now and forever on the side of love. But even as we wait and pray and discern, there is a spirit rising now all over the country of people set free, of people surrendered to love, giving themselves in this pain to the purpose of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And there is power in that, holy power, liberating power. And we are all invited this morning and always to be about whatever it takes to also get ourselves free. May we understand ourselves as anointed, appointed, uplifted, and charged, just as the people we are, in the place that we are, with the information we have and the gifts that we bring, individually and together, to engage this world of sorrow with the liberating and transforming power of love, holding out before us at each moment the vision of beloved community, and giving ourselves to that vision with everything that we are. So may it be.
And now let us join together in our closing hymn, Guide My Feet.
As we go from this place, may we be fools for love and pilgrims for justice. And until we meet again, may we walk, roll, and move in beloved community. Go in peace.